Welcome everyone to Insurance Nexus podcast, and we are delighted to welcome today people from over 5 continents, which is fantastic. Number of people that are obviously demonstrating interest in our topic, the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence, and how is this a game changer for connected insurance. I'm delighted to welcome our speakers, Stefan de Kezel from Ageas, João Machado from Fidelidade, Jenny Truman from Direct Line, and Christian Zieler from Generali. So all of our speakers are connected with innovation and transformation within the insurance sector. And without further ado, what I would like to do is to explain that all of these speakers are going to be represented at the forthcoming event of which is a Connected Insurance Summit Europe, and that is being held on the 11th and 12th of June this year. Recognizing that quite often as technology develops, it is in one particular area, for example, Internet of Things, and then as time is progressing, we're starting to see greater convergence and thinking around the opportunities as different types of technologies can be started to be brought together. And that's really our topic today, around the convergence and the juxtaposition between IoT and AI. What I'd like to do, first of all, is to introduce Stefan de Kezel, and he's going to explain what are some of the emergent themes and trends that he's seeing in the industry, along with some of the challenges and considerations that are also emerging from his perspective. Stefan.
So thank you, Francisca, and happy to be here today to explain a bit how we look at these evolutions in Internet of Things and artificial intelligence. So Internet of Things has been something that has been hyped for quite a few years now. And what we see today, and I'm mainly focusing here on what we see in the retail market, things might be and are a bit different probably in the industrial market, but is that we have not yet seen mass adoption. And we are a bit back there also by what Gartner says. If you look at the hype curve today, this is at the at what we call the peak of expectations. And I guess a lot of that has to do with the fact that actually consumers don't necessarily know what Internet of Things is. And so some of them might have a Nest or have heard of a Nest, might have an intelligent voice assistant like an Alexa or a Google Home, etc. But they don't necessarily link this to Internet of Things. Now, we do believe that the Internet of Things holds very great promises going forward for insurance, but also for other players in that field. And one of the reasons for that basically is that if you couple it with artificial intelligence, we can actually start thinking about some very interesting value proposition for customers. And this is for us actually the key starting point. There has to be a clear value proposition for the customer. It is not about trying to sell some sort of techie device to a consumer and then linking that to an app. So when we talk about the first days of the intelligent thermostats, what we quickly saw is people could then from an app decide to set the temperature remotely. That's all really well, but you get less excited about that after about a week, and then the hype dies away. But with artificial intelligence, you'll be able to do a lot more. And the reason the two go hand in hand to me is that on the one hand, especially machine learning and artificial intelligence requires a lot of data. And on the other hand, Internet of Things, which are basically sensors that you can place and connect, they will provide that data. But Internet of Things requires intelligence to be able to offer valuable services to consumers. So the two together will make indeed that you as an insurer are able to create an offer or a service that the consumer finds particularly appealing. Now, what exactly this will be is still to be decided. We've seen a lot of initiatives in the market, as we say, and we're active in some of them ourselves, mainly from an experimental point of view, because we still first need to learn from the data that we're gathering what is possible, but also the consumers still need to see where the value lies for them. And a lot of that is, if you look at consumers, is about seeking convenience and providing them contextual services, personalized contextual services, which in our view means that inevitably the IoT offering together with AI has to be virtually invisible most of the time and only there when you would need it or when it feels the need to inform you of certain events taking place. Now, importantly, when you look at the challenges which you mentioned, is of course that from a consumer point of view, because he's not yet aware of the possibilities, yes, it's also very hard for him to imagine what would be possible. So part of that we will have to bring to this consumer in terms of a value proposition. But then we'll need to learn from this consumer in terms of, is that exactly what he or she is looking for, and does it indeed bring the value? And we will not be able to do that alone. So for me, this is very much going to be an ecosystem play, because we will need to work together with a lot of companies, with a lot of players, to be able to bring a valuable offer to this consumer. It's also fair to say that I guess for most consumers, insurers are not exactly the first place they'll be looking for when they look at their smart home devices, for example. And even in IoT applied in the car, telematics, we've seen that work mostly in distressed markets, but what we're seeing now is that even car manufacturers themselves are starting to offer this, not as part of an insurance offering, but more as a global offering of a connected car. And this is where we believe we can play a role, but again, it will be with a number of partners, an ecosystem play. Another important part will be about the data. You will be working with a lot of data, so there is some regulation as what you're allowed to do with that data or not. But also, I think that a customer doesn't really care all that much about what data you have of that customer until you use it in a way that the consumer doesn't like. Then he will all of a sudden be very much aware of what you're doing with his or her data, and then you can quickly run into problems. And then the last challenge for us is, of course, also the whole cyber risk. And what if somebody would get access? It's true that in Internet of Things today, the sensors in terms of security, there are still some challenges ahead. And I can imagine, I mean, we have seen some of these, for example, smart door locks being hacked or a software update going wrong and people being unable to access their home. That's not something you would be looking for today in this world. So all in all, I think it's a very promising field. I think with machine learning, we'll be able to use the data that has been generated by the IoT to bring some valuable services to the consumer, but we will not do it alone. It will be an ecosystem play, and there are still some risks which we have to take care of.
Thank you, Stefan. So what we're hearing is obviously that the development of new products and services needs to be very much focused on the customer. Perhaps in the early days of this kind of involvement, it can be somewhat more focused towards the technology, but definitely to really for companies to be able to, in the industry, to maximize the opportunities that this can afford, a customer-focused strategy and the appropriate value propositions that are meaningful to customers is absolutely critical. What I'd like to do now is invite João Machado to also talk about the emergent themes and trends and challenges and considerations that he's observing in the industry currently.
Thank you, Francesca. From a perspective of an insurance company, we see IoT as an excellent way to bring connectivity between the insurance company and the customers. And artificial intelligence benefiting from all the data generated and also from that connectivity to create new value propositions that you can provide to the customers. And when we look at these two, I would say, emergent technologies or emergency ecosystems, as Stefan called it, we basically see it in 3 dimensions. The first is that allow us to create customer engagement. And this is a long discussed topic across the industry, which is how can we increase the engagement between the insurance company and the clients. Usually, we interact with the clients in 3 situations: when we sell a policy, when there is a claim, and when we are either renewing or canceling the policy. And it's something that we need to improve if we want to be closer with them. By having more connectivity, by complementing that connectivity with different value propositions, we can create a different engagement and be closer to our customers' needs, which can be addressed based on insurance or other services that can be complemented as additional value propositions. The second dimension, which is obviously very important, is how can we improve our business models by having all these new data generated, as well these new capabilities in terms of artificial intelligence. Can we increase our profitability either by reducing claims, meaning bringing prevention over our houses, the cars, and the way we live? Can we increase the efficiency of our processes? For example, by having automated claims processes based on image or voice recognition. Can we develop or improve our current products, having dynamic pricing models based on the data generated? Can we even create new products because we have new ways to be near our customers? And for example, microinsurance is exactly one of those examples. So how can we, based on this new world of IoT, this connectivity brought by IoT, as well artificial intelligence, either in the way of voice and image recognition, machine learning, how can we improve our business model? The third one, which is also another which we found very interesting, is how can we use IoT and artificial intelligence to connect different ecosystems. Usually, we are used to discuss health ecosystem, home ecosystem, automotive ecosystem, but usually the client may have an integrated need. He wants to connect information of his car, his home, his life, his health profile, and have an adapted offer based on the current context. And this is something that IoT and artificial intelligence allows us to do: connect data, find more relationships across data, and perhaps have integrated offers across several ecosystems. So these three dimensions, customer engagement, business model, and ecosystem integration, is something that we are looking into detail based on these solutions. Yes, we believe that there's also some challenges to look for. As always, technology, it's fantastic. Technology, it's evolving very, very fast. But we also believe that insurance companies are not today technology providers, which means that contrary from an Apple, which provides an experience based on a smartphone, the smartphone itself, it's also part of their competitive advantage. What we need is to have strong technology, flawless, that meaning that this connectivity will not derail into a wrong experience. So we want to make it, and as Stefan said, completely invisible or virtually invisible. And for that, we need to have mostly positive experience. Second thing, which I believe is also a challenge, is the level of connectivity, the current level of connectivity. So we find in many markets that the level of connectivity is relatively low. And as an insurance company, we need to understand if our strategy goes through increasing that connectivity or finding the right partnerships to increase that connectivity through other players in other markets. There is a moment that we can decide if we want to put a small device in someone else's house, or if the need is larger than that, because the value proposition for the client requires more than that, if you really want to invest in fully connected those clients. So this is something that we need to take in consideration, that we are looking into something that has certain assumptions, connectivity, data generation, but sometimes our clients are not willing or prepared to be as connected as that. The third thing is also very important, which is IoT and artificial intelligence allow us to create interactions, allow us to generate data, allow us to generate different value propositions. We need to be careful that at the same time, we need to consider that most of these value propositions also require creating relationships. And we need to find the right balance between having artificial intelligence connected through IoT or other ways with our clients, with our own processes to follow up and follow our clients across the customer journey. So we believe that this emotional part of the client, together with connectivity and all the value propositions that we're creating, are something that we need to be fully aware when defining our solutions. Based on this, we are looking to the future in many, many ways. Yes, we believe that having the benefit of many of this connectivity and together with artificial intelligence will allow us to increase the engagement across ecosystems. We are looking into models like gamification, social models, everything that we can use to create the value proposition that our clients will follow for their own life. We are looking to new different business models that can be enabled by IoT together with artificial intelligence, on-demand insurance, microinsurance, parametric or behavioral insurance. It's something that we are very keen to look into. We are looking to also beyond engagement to see if we can use these new solutions to provide seamless experiences, to have, for example, claims processes pretty seamless and in a way that our clients would find it as the most pleasant experience when you're having a claim. As well, looking to the power that analytics coming from artificial intelligence and the data generated can provide, either for increasing our predictive skills, either to create tailor-made products. So we believe that there is a strong world ahead, and we are now preparing that journey.
Thank you very much, João. And so I think what we're seeing is that perhaps in the past, the relationship between customers and insurers has been perhaps more of a transactional characterized relationship or interaction. And in the new world, there'll be a greater need for two-way interactions so that the new innovative products and services also will have a better opportunity to be able to be incrementally improved upon in this new world. And what I would also like to say is that please, in terms of interaction, do send your questions in to us because towards the final section of our webinar, we will be very much liking to share those questions and answers as well from our panel. So moving on to our next speaker, Jenny Truman. She's Head of Connected Homes and Product Innovation at Direct Line Group. Jenny, it'd be great to hear from you what you're seeing as emergent themes and trends and the challenges and considerations in your field at the moment.
Yeah, sure, of course. I will firstly say I seem to be dropping out occasionally on the phone, so if you lose me, I'll try and dial back in, and I apologise for that. So in terms of what we're seeing, my role is focused entirely kind of on that connected home opportunity from a home insurance point of view, how we build our role in our customers' lives and build propositions using that technology and what that means for us as an insurer. We're kind of looking at three trends that are driving our thinking. So the first one is personalization and that desire that people want, not just obviously in insurance, but across their whole lives, for the companies that they interact with to really understand them, not a kind of typical them. Control, so I know what's going on at home, I can control things remotely, I have much better input into those things. And then safety, so clearly vehicles are becoming more safe using technology. We see that across other industries. People will really expect that from the technology that they're using in their home. So those are the themes that we're basing our work on. We're really looking, and I was really heartened to hear everybody else talking in a very similar way about the customer need right at the core of that. So trying to understand what's going to be genuinely useful and meaningful for our customers in terms of what we can deliver, how far we can go with that, how comfortable they are with us being in their homes in that way, and how we build up that relationship with our customers. Ultimately, looking at how our role is changing to move towards protection as we do now, but into prevention and ultimately prediction, and how all of the data and insight that's coming out of these devices can combine with our data and experience and knowledge that we've built up as an industry to really be able to predict when something might happen, prevent it before it happens, and really change our role in our customers' lives. We'll have much more interaction with our customers through the technology. Again, it's a balance as how much people might want or not want, and we need to make sure that we're not getting lots of kind of false positives coming out. We're calling people all the time when that's not necessary. And I think it's also important that we know when and when not to automate and use technology. So home insurance is still quite emotional for people. When something goes wrong, you still need that human interaction, the empathy, understanding and experience that people bring. And so it's that balance between how much you automate and how much you still allow people to talk to somebody, to talk to us, and to have that kind of hand-holding experience. In terms of the challenges, consumer trust in the industry is obviously something that we want to make sure that we're building in a positive way with our consumers. So, we get lots of feedback from customers saying they don't want us watching them through cameras and things like that, which kind of makes us laugh a bit because it's not what we're going to do. But actually, that's the perception that people have. There's a concern around what we might do with the data if they share data with us, how we drive a positive experience for our customers from that, because their first thoughts are, well, you'll use it to penalise me through premium or not paying claims. And we have to build that trust and give people the confidence that that's not what we're going to do. I think it was mentioned we're not tech companies. And I think one of the things I'm really clear on is we have to find the right partnerships. It can be quite difficult to do that. And also we must work to our strengths. So we bring huge amounts of knowledge and experience. If we can partner with people who can fill the gaps where we don't have the technology or the experience in those areas, then that's when it becomes really powerful. I don't think we should try and overstep that. And then in terms of the enablers, absolutely, the capability to deal with all of the data that's coming in, all of this new data, real time. How do we deliver services using that data in a way that we can see what's happening, we can control for outliers, we can really manage that through our organisation. I think the other thing as well is, forgive me. Yeah, so, and again, it's just that the challenge for me is how customers feel about the types of things we think we get all excited about wanting to deliver for them. So we talk about it in terms of how we might enter their home in a way that, so we might start in the grounds of the home and people are very comfortable with us helping them if they have a security incident, they've got outdoor cameras. But how do they feel about maybe us being in the hallway or the kitchen, the bathroom for water leaks? What do they think about maybe if there's cameras? And so it's step by step by step, really feeling our way through that to make sure that we're not overstepping that mark and we really understand how consumers are feeling about it.
That's really interesting, Jenny. And one of the things that obviously facilitates bringing together other ancillary services with specific insurance products is there are obviously different standards sometimes inherent in that are being used, and from a data perspective, interoperability hubs. How do you see that impacting when we're trying to bring together different types of data from those varying products and services?
Yeah, I think that is a really good question. It's a difficult challenge, and it's one that we don't yet have the answer to. I think it's one that in terms of IoT, particularly in the home, we're watching at the moment because we can see lots of different players are really making that play for the home, and who's almost going to win out in that and have that control and to have the technology that can work together and the data that is consistent from that. So it's definitely something that is a watching brief for us to see how that works out in the future, and it will be absolutely top of mind in terms of how we deliver things.
Yeah, and in terms of how an organisation, and we've got, I think, a number of solution providers and insurers in our audience currently thinking about how they might build capability. Generically, what are some of those key considerations that they should be thinking about at this stage?
So I think in terms of how you build capability, the way we're looking at it is very much in that kind of test and learn and being very agile. So I'm conscious that this is very new territory for some of the things that we're looking at for us as an organisation. So we need to be able to do it in ways that means that we can adapt very quickly. We can learn from the data that we're seeing, so constantly looking back and understanding the results and how you then develop and adapt to that is absolutely key, because we're not going to get it right immediately from the very first off. And so that flexibility is particularly key and can be particularly challenging when you're in a large organisation. So how do you manage that through where you have very large processes that are taking place and everything is in a standard way? It's vital. It's very difficult.
Yeah, so that it sounds like that requires a different kind of thinking, a more iterative approach, and continual learning loops in order to be able to best learn in a kind of expedient and also from a cost-effective perspective. Is that?
Yeah, and I think the big challenge there is the right scale, because, for example, if you're talking about how you might change claims outcomes, some of the frequencies of those claims are quite low. So it's how you actually learn and iterate quickly when the data that you might be seeing come back, there's not going to be that high kind of frequency coming through. And I think that is something that can be quite difficult as well.
Thanks very much, Jenny. Very interesting. And what I'd next like to do is introduce you to Christian Zieler, who is Open Innovation Lead at Generali, to share his perspectives on emergent themes and trends and his challenges and considerations, both from a company and an industry perspective. Christian.
Thank you, Francesca. I think a lot of really important things have already been said by Stefan, Joao, and Jenny. So I'll try to also tie them a bit together and highlight the things that I think stand out as well. First of all, I think a lot of the challenge that we have as an industry with IoT itself, I think we've talked more about IoT than AI really, are the same challenges that IoT for consumers has in general. It was mentioned that mass adoption still hasn't really happened for a lot of cases. Jenny said a couple of interesting things also how this has to do with trust of consumers. The other thing is also it has a lot to do with behavioral changes. So we've done a lot of studies on wearables, on IoT devices that you can use in your everyday life. And even if you can prove to people there's a significant add value in their lives, it still takes a huge amount just in behavioral change to actually start adopting these things and using them. So you have to really communicate a really, really big perceived value for people to use that. I think it's a very different story if you look at the industry and B2B cases, but if we stay at retail, which is also much more our focus, this is still a huge challenge. And the second part is if we look at the challenge of combining IoT with insurance, I think this was also mentioned, I think in some way, I think the huge challenge to me has also been really to find really good use cases where we can truly say this is, for me as a customer, added value. So where basically insurance plus IoT, where we have an equation where 1 + 1 = 3. And this has been really, really tough. I think a lot of the cases we've been seeing the last couple of years, be it cars, health, home, and whatever ecosystem we look at, I think we see that a lot of these cases still have been focusing vastly on underwriting and getting better pricing based on these data points. And even these cases, the business cases, they are tough, as Jenny mentioned. So some of the frequencies get in the way, and how do you actually compensate the cost of devices and all of that to actually even win there. But especially from a consumer perspective, it's just not that interesting to come there and then say, if you put this device into your life, I'll give you a slightly better premium, or I'll give you this device for free. So I think what has been mentioned a couple of times is really how we need to find really interesting value propositions where me as the retail customer, I want to use a certain type of service and I do perceive added value. And I think it's definitely where we go into the prevention space much more, and even more than prevention, really something where I get an added value in my everyday life. And so I think we have seen a couple of cases that I find particularly interesting in probably the car space and the health space, where some of those things took off a bit earlier than in other use cases. And Generali itself also has done some early work there for many years now. And there we see some cases where we can start creating feedback loops with people. So it's not just collecting the data, but trying to get some insight out of the data and feed that back to customers to add additional value. So someone, and this might be the insurance, or as it was mentioned, that it's also a matter of the ecosystem play and other partners. Someone might help you to become a better driver, or increase your physical health overall based on the data that's collected through IoT devices. So I think when we talk about IoT insurance, it's really IoT data in insurance, and the advances in data analytics are have been crucial to getting more value out of that. And so I think that's really where the added value of AI becomes quite obvious, because I think AI is really, or can be seen to some extent, or in some areas at least, as an additional tool in our toolbox to analyze vast amounts of data. And with AI and certain reinforcing algorithms, we have better abilities now, and I think this will only get better every day, to identify patterns, to identify certain anomalies within the data in more efficient ways. I think this will hopefully help to bring more of these real use cases where I get quite near time, so maybe real time even, feedback on certain behaviors as a customer that I want to appreciate. The other thing that we have, or I personally feel quite optimistic about, and this is something that then goes into a lot of the IoT devices that are closer to the traditional insurance business, is how machine learning has helped computers and software to really see like human beings. So computer vision is definitely something that will be one of the fields where I think we will see a lot of implications. I think in connected home, it is quite clear that there's some value in just having products that can identify where it's someone breaking into your house, or it's just a cat walking around. But we also see these things with claims assessment when we can have drones. I think there AI really helps us to do more of the processing of the data on the edge devices, really on the IoT devices, and then feedback insights rather than just vast amounts of data, and take certain decisions right there at the spot. I think there's going to be some interesting changes we see that then also benefit the customer more through how much more efficient we become. So we can be quicker in helping out customers in situations of need. And then there's I think completely different use cases that I think we as an insurance industry have traditionally been the ones who have dealt with a lot of data already. So I think this is something that obviously has come under threat by the big tech companies. But this is really something where we need to stand our ground and use that vast amount of data that's being collected and keep our space in there. We do have some great capabilities there, and I think this is really our potential also in the future to become a valuable partner in there by understanding data, collecting data, and really being a partner there for others. And then last but not least, maybe one more thing I think that is completely flipping like this whole concept is really also if we look at AI, then we really talk about machines taking more and more autonomous decisions rather than just data analytics where we provide insights. And I think these autonomous decisions in a lot of places, and this might be autonomous cars, for example, which I think is one of the more well-known examples, will also create additional or very different risk pools than today. And I think the jury is still out on what this will mean in the long run and how the insurance model will change. But I think there are certain threats to something like a cash cow, like the motor insurance market. But then there's also, I think, big potential in new risk pools being created by more automation in IoT, because there's a lot of decisions being taken all the time by machines, and there's a lot of interesting questions around liability and what's the problem there, and who is actually liable if something goes wrong. So I think there's definitely something where insurances will be able to enable new use cases by supporting certain processes.
Thank you very much, Christian. So one of perhaps the defining aspects of this juxtaposition between IoT and AI, based on what we're hearing from our speakers, is that it's moving away from the notion of just being able to inform customers of something specific, but how insurers are able to then help further with their decision making and in order to achieve some actionable outcomes for the customer, rather than them just being told something is maybe not working. And so, the creativity that's going to extend the types of products and services to enable that is obviously at a relatively early stage in the life cycle right now. One of the areas that this also plays to is the issue of talent in the insurance sector. And just to use a UK statistic for one moment, there are something like only 1% of university students graduating who consider going into the insurance sector. And of course, conversely, there's obviously the opportunity for a lot of exciting new innovation and creativity. So, one of the areas is how the sector seeks to address enticing the right talent that's going to enable competitive advantage for insurers is going to be a critical part of that. So just an open question to our four speakers. How do you see that situation currently in terms of the talent funnel in the insurance sector? And where do you see that talent can be drawn from in the future?
So I don't mind answering this. Sorry. So
please go ahead.
Thanks, Jenny.
That's okay. So I completely kind of agree with what you're saying around it might not be top of people's list to be excited about coming to work for the insurance sector. I think there's some promotion that we as an industry need to do. And as we do start to drive innovation, I think that will become easier. I think for individual companies, it's about how you promote the work that you're doing and the opportunities. I also think that the InsurTech space will potentially really help that. That's maybe somewhere where certain people will feel more attracted to, and that will kind of promote the benefits of insurance and the
Thanks, Jane.
benefits of working there. Thank you.
Okay.
I would add to that. Oh, sorry.
That's all right. So, who's speaking, please? Is that Christian?
It's Christian speaking. I would just add to that very briefly. I do think, in a similar way as Jenny has put it, I do think we have been telling story, like I tell a story a lot on events, like when you see graduates, about the insurance industry for sure having a lot of need to catch up on certain technology topics and being maybe seen, like generally perceived as not a very innovative industry overall. But I think there's a nice way of flipping it and saying, because of that situation, I think now is the time to really see a lot of movement. I think there's a lot of money going into InsurTech in the last couple of years in VC money. We see a lot of really activity in big corporates, creating innovation labs, doing all kind of things to reinvent the industry. So I think one can also flip that and say it's really now is the time to really join the industry and be part of that change. And I think this is definitely something that at least here in Switzerland we see resonating with a lot of graduates.
That's great. Thank you very much, Christian. What I'd like to do now is to open up to questions that we've been receiving. So thank you to everyone in our audience who's been sending us through questions. The first one that I have is as follows. This person said, in spite of all of the projected benefits, what is preventing insurers from embracing connected insurance wholeheartedly? Other than telematics, there's not much else. Who'd like to take that question from our speaker panel?
Well, I can start. This is João. I can start building a bit of the answer. Well, several things are preventing. The first is the value proposition itself. So many of the clients either are not connected, or they are not interested on being connected, or they are connected through other means, sometimes by their own means. And sometimes the value proposition that insurance companies are providing are not sufficiently attractive to increase this connectivity. Telematics is a good example. In many countries, the discount provided over the price of a policy, it's not sufficiently attractive to put someone putting, for example, a dongle in his car and providing the data on how he drives. So the value proposition associated to what we are offering, I think, needs to be improved. So when we are talking about taking the most advantage from an insurance perspective on this connectivity and put this in the market, we need to make sure that the value proposition that we are offering to our clients is attractive, it's properly understood, and that they can recognize the insurance industry or their insurance company as the rightful provider of that value proposition. And sometimes this is not clear yet in the market.
Thank you. Would any of our other speaker panel like to contribute also to this particular question?
Yes, this is Stefan. I agree with what Joao says. I think it's ultimately about consumers. They seek convenience. So we can imagine a lot of things that we can throw at them, which might have some benefits on our side, tested or not. But ultimately, the consumer is looking for convenience, for something that will free up time, basically. Yeah? And it's very hard today with the current state, even of this technology, to offer that. I mean, first of all, as I said at the beginning, they hardly know what it is. They tend to look only for one or two devices, usually more in the entertainment sphere. And the other devices, I mean, they require a number of things. It's usually a retrofit market today, so you need to put in an effort already. Even if you would mitigate that by providing somebody to put it in for you, what happens if something goes wrong? What happens if you get these signals? So it's not offering the convenience, I think, that they're seeking yet today. And as long as we are not able yet to solve that and to clearly understand where indeed we could really help them, it will be hard to get traction in this market.
Thank you. Another question we have come through is asking, what is the best balance of AI and IoT-driven customer interactions compared to human interactions? Would our panel like to share their thoughts on that, please?
One of the things that I would like to say regarding that is, again, the balance between convenience and emotions. It's highly convenient to have some kind of artificial intelligent algorithm linked to any channel, for example, a chatbot, able to interact with a client to propose some kind of new offer, new solution, to propose healthy habits, to propose safety measures while driving. But this is convenience. The other part is emotion. And most of the times, decisions that users are making are based on emotions. For example, buying a life insurance. And that emotion needs to be supported most of the time still by a human interaction. I think the best balance is to understand on the journey where is the convenience part the most important, and there address it based on artificial intelligence, and where emotions take the lead, and we should provide additionally or complementary the support of human interaction. And I think this balance is quite important.
I would completely agree with that.
Jenny?
Yeah, so I think that's absolutely right. I'd also say that I guess it depends on the kind of customers that you have. So there might be certain segments, and if you were weighted towards certain segments where it's more or less appropriate to have a higher technology versus human split and so on. So I think that's an important consideration. It's definitely not going to kind of be the same across all books of business and all types of business.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question we've been receiving some interest in, and I guess this cuts to the heart of privacy, data privacy. IoT and AI will generate a huge amount of data. How do you see implementation of GDPR regulations where profiling is not allowed?
I have a couple of views on that. This is Christian again from Generali. I think this is a super interesting question. I think how, and this is not just in this context, but in more general context, I think in terms of providing better services to our customers, I think there is a huge trend, not just in the insurance industry, to try to not just have customer segment specific services, but really highly individualized services. And you can only do that if you get data about customers. But I think the crucial point is that you have to really provide additional value. So I think one of the key things I believe is to constantly, whenever you collect the data, you ask for consent, and you do give your customers a reason why you collect that data. I think as long as you tell them this is why I'm collecting this, and give them the background, and tell them how it's used in an understandable and easy way, and you connect these things, I think this is really, or in at least some things we have been seeing already, where you do get consent from customers and to actually appreciate that you collect the data because they see additional value. But I think it's a very tricky ground, but I do think as long as you do prove that you provide additional value, there's ways to get a lot of data from customers.
And I guess that the notion of trust and also security lies at the heart of how customers may think about whether to share their data or not. What are other members of our panel's views on how the insurance sector overall gains and wins more trust from clients that perhaps traditionally over a number of years have lost some trust in the sector?
I would say that I would agree with both. I think that transparency is critical. So to be able to show exactly what are you collecting and how you're using it, it's absolutely critical. Second thing is that I would say that it will be important when you have something like GDPR is to provide either ownership or accessibility to your clients on their own generated data. So allow them to have access to use that data could be also a way to improve this transparency.
Thank you. Any other observations in terms of how best to manage and improve notions of trust and security in our sector?
I think, but that's just a general observation, is we need to be indeed much more transparent, but also actually keep our promises and do away with a lot of jargon that we still tend to use. Ultimately, we're selling in a lot of cases a promise, and we don't actually always deliver on that. So that will be a first one. Secondly is if you go into the services space, indeed these will have to be services that a customer appreciates, even to the point that if you were to tell him that if he does not, for example, allow you access to the data, that you would be unable to provide that service. I can imagine that people using some of the Google services or a Waze or something like that will really not easily say don't access my data, because the service they get is very good. And this is the point where I think we as a sector still have to deliver. We really have to bring them services that delight them, to call it like that. And that is, I think, the true challenge for us, where we are still in a business that takes a bit of a different approach to that today.
Thank you. We have another question which we're receiving quite a lot of interest in, and that's with the increasing use of sensors on homes, cars, or location-based sensors. How far are insurance companies moving towards business models like pay as you use, pay as you drive, pay as you travel?
I think this is Christian. This is probably one of the. I think this is probably the space that's most developed out of like all the use cases. I think there's several companies that are already active in the space. There was the acquisition of MyDrive several years ago by Generali in the UK, which is really one of the first pay per mile basically model, where was an interesting first attempt to say if you don't drive all the time, you only pay what you really need. I do think this also ties into a much bigger, let's say, on-demand trend in this world, where we have certain services that are time-bound, and I think this will be something where we will see more and more connectivity also attached to certain activities, so that you can actually automatically track when a certain activity is going on. So it could be something like short-term rentals for items, or you name it. I think there's a lot of different use cases where we'll definitely see more of that.
On that question, others in our panel.
I think we're seeing indeed quite a lot of these things already. Yeah? So it's in telematics, in car telematics, we've seen some of these models. I think the clue there is also to make it as automated as possible for a consumer, because if he has to, even in an on-demand economy, switch on and off, that's not very convenient.
Exactly.
And interestingly, we have another sort of sub-question associated to that, where we have people asking, they're saying the comment is, insurers have embraced usage-based insurance, especially for high-risk drivers. What do the panel see as the next big insurance product that will emerge for the connected vehicle?
Well, I would answer that with a question. Will be the next big product for the vehicle or for the person itself as a mobility when we are talking about self-driving cars? So I think we sometimes need to think beyond just the vehicle itself, but mobility as a whole. I may be more interested being insured every time I enter a taxi or an Uber than just to have different alternative products to my car. And I think mobility will take a different context in this conversation.
Yes, and I guess that plays to the notion that some people will say that the central risk becomes the person over and above a product-centric view, so that actually it's about the kind of risk profile of a specific individual, and then how that impacts in whatever the type of insurance or maybe any other product services that they may be looking to acquire. What other views would our other panel members have on this? So I think moving on, we have, and slightly linked to this, but somebody else has come back to us and said, each presenter has talked about a value proposition for the customer. What methodology would they recommend to use to determine which products and services offer a compelling value proposition?
Well, I would say that it's a very interesting question. I think when you talk about value propositions for the customer, you need to understand the customer and the customer needs. So today, everyone talks about ecosystems. I think one good methodology is to understand how the customer feels its own ecosystem, his life. Is it home, car, health? Is it within the home, family, parents? What are the true needs that he has? Secondly, is to understand beyond insurance, and I would say 90% of my time I don't use the word insurance. So beyond insurance, how can someone who provides peace of mind, like an insurance company, can fill gaps in that in those ecosystems? So understanding how the customer is living, what are the current needs within those ecosystems, I think would be an interesting way to approach it.
Okay.
I fully agree, and I think the next step, what we often do at least, is you then have to test that, because a lot of experimentation helps you in understanding what consumers really want. They might have given you a first idea, you might have figured it out, basically part of it on yourself, but test it with them, yeah? And you will find yourself in feedback loops, iterating on your original product or service until you come to a point where you have something that is indeed really what they meant. So the iteration part in that is really important as well.
Interesting. Sorry, go on, please.
No, I think a lot of this is probably pretty much consensus by now. I think a lot of like these, let's say, more or human-centered approaches where it's not really, you don't really ask people about their insurance needs, but really about their general needs and their life and how they go through the world with a certain type of issue. I think it's really the starting point, and then really iterating as quickly as possible with prototypes that simulate parts of the experience as closely as possible, and just like very quickly move from one iteration to the next. I think this really has probably become, like, over the last decade or so, the gold standard in product and service design. I don't think that that's something very new, but I think it's something that still organizations are embracing and increasingly getting into their DNA.
Thank you. This next question actually looks really at a very specific, I guess, a moral and ethical aspect of insurance. And this person's asked, how can IoT in insurance be used to support vulnerable customers? Or will it exclude or penalize them by only targeting younger, wealthier, and tech-savvy customers? What would be your thoughts on that?
I think that this is an excellent question. And actually, I see IoT as an enabler for certain groups to lead actually a much richer life. I'm just going to take one example here, but for example, the elderly, one of the recurring themes there is that these people like to remain or live independently for a longer period. But that is often made difficult because maybe their relatives live far away. They don't always know how things are going. They might fall and nobody might know about it. They might need meals prepared for them, etc. And through IoT and your ecosystem of services that you can provide, you can actually bring that peace of mind both to this person and to its relatives. You can create a number of services around that which would make the life for such an individual much more interesting and richer. So I think it's something that can really help there.
Anyone else would like to add to this question?
Yes. I don't sometimes maybe perceive that we are benefiting the healthier and wealthier and penalizing the weaker. That is not the point. The point is IoT can help us promote good behaviors. It doesn't mean that we are benefiting the healthier. It means that the ones that are likely to have more risks, we can help them reducing those risks. Because basically insurance is a game based on risks. And if someone is healthier, obviously is less prone to some risks in their lives. What we want to do with this is to give all the other ones the ability to improve their lives, the ability to improve the way they drive, the ability to improve the security of their houses, and consequently give them conditions to have a benefit from there, for example, in the premium. Obviously that this is a win-win situation. They win because they have a healthier life, they have a better premium on their car, they have less accidents, they have less risk in their life, and obviously insurance companies may act on prevention and reduce losses. So I think it's more giving everyone conditions to improve their risk level.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank our speaker panel for all their contributions and trust that you've found this insightful. And if you would like to hear about more, all the members of this panel will be speaking at our Connected Insurance Summit in London, being held on the 11th and 12th of June, and hope that you can join us there. Thank you all for joining us today, and we will be sending out further information for you to be able to contact us, so those details will be provided to you. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.